The sea no longer opens like a promise. It lies wide and quiet, a flat horizon where every root is watched, where even the wind seems to hesitate before moving. This is a time when the ocean has stopped inviting wanderers and begun measuring the cost of every crossing. You arrive at the edge of an age ending. Pirates are no longer whispered legends drifting between taverns and stars. They are a fading species, hunted, catalogued, erased, one flag at a time. Stay here for a moment. Let the salt air settle in your thoughts, because if you ever dreamed of absolute freedom, this is the moment the world decides whether it is allowed to survive. If you enjoy these journeys, please like, share, and subscribe. Tell me where you're listening from, what time it is, and the topics you'd love to explore. Your thoughts may guide our next adventure. This world does not begin with land, nor with borders drawn on maps. It begins with water, endless, breathing, remembering. In World's End, the ocean is not merely a setting, it is a living presence, carrying memory the way other worlds carry history. It remembers every crossing, every promise spoken above its surface, every oath broken beneath the stars. The sea does not rush to judge, but it never forgets. And when it responds, it does so according to rules far older than any flag or crown. Within this vast body of water, balance is fragile. The world holds itself together through three forces that exist in constant tension. First, there are the pirates, creatures of instinctive freedom. They do not seek to fix the world or improve it. They seek only the right to choose their own direction, even if that choice leads into uncertainty. Their freedom is messy, imperfect, and often contradictory, yet it is deeply human. Opposing them stands the East India Trading Company, an embodiment of artificial order. This force believes that chaos can be solved, that unpredictability can be erased, that the sea itself can be reduced to routes, schedules, and control. It does not act out of passion or rage, but out of belief that a perfectly regulated world is a safer one. In doing so, it forgets that safety without choice slowly becomes another form of captivity. Between these two forces lies the third, the sea and its curses. This is not morality and not justice. It is natural law, ancient, indifferent, and absolute. It does not care who is right or wrong. It only responds when balance is disturbed, when duties are abandoned, when power is taken without understanding its cost. At the heart of this system stands the sea itself, often personified through Calypso. She is neither benevolent nor cruel. She does not reward loyalty, nor punish ambition out of spite. She reacts, control provokes resistance, betrayal leaves scars. The sea answers not to intention, but to consequence. The Flying Dutchman exists as part of this same logic. It is not a curse by design, but a mechanism, a bridge between life and death, meant to keep the flow of the world intact. Its purpose is quiet, repetitive, and demanding. When respected, the system holds. When exploited for power or convenience, the world begins to tilt, and the ocean responds in kind. At its core, At World's End is not asking who deserves to win. It asks something far more uncomfortable. Can freedom survive inside a world that demands order? And if it can, what must be sacrificed to protect it? This story does not offer triumph. It offers a reckoning, a reminder that the right to choose always carries a price, and that someone, somewhere, will be asked to pay it. The ocean in At World's End no longer feels like an invitation. It stretches outward as it always has, wide, calm, seemingly endless. But something has changed beneath that familiar surface. The sea is still vast, still open, yet it is no longer free. It has been claimed, not by borders or walls, but by invisible systems of control that turn openness into exposure. Once, the horizon meant possibility, a line where the known world dissolved into chance. Now, every route across the water feels measured. Each crossing carries the quiet awareness that it can be seen, followed, intercepted. The sea has become a monitored expanse, where movement itself is an act of risk. Ships no longer disappear into distance. They are counted, tracked, anticipated. From above, the ocean appears limitless, but from within it the truth is different. Every course can be redirected. Every escape has an answer waiting for it. A ship does not need to be destroyed to be defeated. It only needs to be found, delayed, boxed in by forces that move faster and strike without warning. In this world, a journey can turn into a sentence without a single storm forming in the sky. The routes themselves are no longer neutral. Water that once felt impartial now carries intent. Each wave holds uncertainty, not because it may sink you, but because it may betray you. The sea has become a surface of exposure rather than concealment. There is no hiding in its openness anymore. Freedom, once protected by distance and unpredictability, has lost its camouflage. What makes this ocean unsettling is not its violence, but its restraint. It does not rage. It does not roar. It watches. Control does not announce itself with thunder. It arrives quietly, persistently, until the weight of it becomes impossible to ignore. Ships sail beneath clear skies, yet every mile forward feels heavier than the last. The fear here is subtle. It is not the fear of drowning or destruction. It is the fear of being known too well, of realizing that choice still exists, but only within narrowing margins. The sea allows movement, but not escape. It permits travel, but not disappearance. Freedom survives, but under constant observation. And at world's end, the ocean reflects a deeper truth about the world it holds. Control does not need to close spaces to dominate them. It only needs to make them transparent. And so the sea remains wide, calm, and deceptively open, while quietly suffocating the very freedom it once seemed to promise. World's End is not a destination you can point to on a map. It cannot be reached by sailing far enough, nor discovered by following the right stars. In A.B. World's End, this place exists as a condition, a moment when the rules of the world quietly change, and nothing familiar agrees to guide you any longer. There are no fixed coordinates for World's End. It reveals itself only when travelers move beyond the comfort of known order, when routes no longer make sense, when direction stops offering reassurance. To reach it, one must first accept being lost, not as an accident, but as a choice. It appears only to those willing to abandon certainty. This is not where ships are shattered by force. Hulls remain intact, sails still catch the wind. What breaks instead is orientation. Compasses lose their authority. Instruments meant to promise safety fall silent. At World's End, navigation itself becomes meaningless because the world no longer agrees to be understood in familiar ways. Crossing this threshold is not dramatic. There is no explosion of light, no visible gate swinging open. The change is subtle, almost gentle. One moment you believe you are still moving forward, and the next you realize that forward no longer exists. There is no return path, not because it is blocked, but because it has dissolved. The right to turn back quietly disappears. To pass world's end is to step outside the logic of the old world. Cause and effect loosen their grip. Time stretches, folds, or pauses. Identity begins to blur. You are no longer only a sailor or a pirate or a survivor. You become a symbol moving through a story larger than yourself. Meaning replaces direction. This boundary stands between states of being, between life and death, where existence continues but no longer follows mortal rhythms, between reality and the hidden layers beneath it, where what was once unseen now becomes unavoidable, between the human and the mythic, where personal intention gives way to larger forces and roles. The world's end is not meant to be conquered. It does not reward bravery or punish fear. It simply asks a question of anyone who crosses it. Are you willing to let go of who you were in order to continue? Those who step beyond it do not emerge unchanged. Some return with knowledge, others return carrying burdens they never asked for, and some never truly return at all. In At World's End, this threshold exists to remind us that freedom sometimes requires more than movement. It demands surrender of certainty, of control, and of the comforting illusion that the world will always explain itself. The maelstrom is not simply a storm born of wind and water. In At World's End, it feels less like a natural phenomenon and more like a structure, an architecture shaped by accumulation, a place where everything the world has tried to delay, ignore, or suppress is finally forced into motion. This vortex is formed from pressures that have nowhere left to go, resentment held too long, promises spoken and then abandoned, debts acknowledged but never repaid. These unseen weights sink into the fabric of the world, layer by layer, until movement itself becomes unstable. The maelstrom rises not as an accident, but as a response. Here, every path converges. No ship can circle around it. No intention can remain distant. The currents pull inward, drawing enemies and allies alike into the same collapsing space. Neutral ground ceases to exist. The world narrows until standing apart is no longer possible. What makes the maelstrom terrifying is not its violence, but its honesty. It does not choose sides. It does not favor justice over cruelty or freedom over control. Instead, it strips away pretense. Every force entering the vortex is compelled to reveal its true nature. Strategy unravels, plans fracture, masks dissolve under pressure. Inside the spinning walls of water, perfection is impossible. There is no flawless maneuver, no outcome without loss. Each decision becomes final. Each movement carries weight that cannot be undone. The maelstrom compresses time, forcing choices that might have been postponed for years into a single, inescapable moment. This is where the past demands payment. Actions once believed, forgotten return with clarity. Alliances formed out of convenience collapse under strain. Vows made in quieter waters resurface, asking whether they were ever meant to be kept. The maelstrom does not invent consequences. It collects them. As an architecture, it exists to close what was left open, to settle what remained unresolved. It is the world's way of forcing balance when no one else is willing to restore it. In this sense, the vortex is not destruction, but accounting, a final reckoning written in motion and pressure rather than words. When the maelstrom finally releases what it has gathered, the world is no longer the same. Something has been paid, something has been lost, and something fragile and altered is allowed to continue. And at world's end, this storm stands as the place where the world confronts itself and accepts the cost of everything it has become. Pirates in At World's End are not shaped as heroes, and they are never meant to be. They do not rise to defend justice, nor do they fight to correct the world's wrongs. Their struggle is quieter, more personal. It is the insistence on choosing their own course, even when that choice carries risk, contradiction, and consequence. They exist beyond official law, not because they crave chaos, but because imposed order offers them no place. To live as a pirate is to refuse a system that decides value, purpose, and direction in advance. It is a rejection of being managed, categorized, or made efficient. Freedom for them is not an abstract ideal. It is the right to decide how one lives and how one faces the cost of that decision. Yet this freedom is not without structure. Pirates cannot survive in pure disorder. Without restraint, they would consume one another long before any external force intervenes. This is why the pirate code exists, not as law carved in stone, but as an agreement held together by mutual understanding. It is flexible, often bent, sometimes mocked, but never fully discarded. The code is not designed to create justice. It is designed to prevent collapse. It exists so that betrayal carries weight, loyalty carries meaning, and survival remains possible among those who refuse to be ruled. In this sense, the pirate code is not authority. It is compromise, a fragile line drawn by people who distrust lines altogether. Pirates represent a conscious form of chaos, not randomness, but choice without permission. Their world is unpredictable because it is human, driven by desire, fear, pride, and hope. Every pirate understands, whether openly or not, that freedom demands accountability. There is no institution to absorb failure, no system to erase mistakes. What they choose, they must live with. This makes pirates dangerous, not because they are violent, but because they cannot be fully controlled. They do not fit neatly into systems built on obedience. They move where they are not expected. They adapt where rules would otherwise hold firm. In doing so, they expose the fragility of absolute order. Within the world of At World's End, pirates serve a deeper function. They are a necessary counterweight, a reminder that a world governed only by efficiency, regulation, and predictability eventually loses its soul. Their presence keeps the balance uneven, unstable, and alive. They are not meant to win. They are meant to exist, to prove that choice still matters, even when it is inconvenient, even when it is dangerous, and even when the world would be easier without it. The East India Trading Company does not move with anger. It does not roar, threaten, or revel in destruction. In At World's End, it advances quietly, efficiently, with a calm certainty of something that believes it is right. This is not a force driven by passion, but by logic, cold, precise, and unyielding. The EITC is not chaos opposing freedom. It is order opposing uncertainty. Its power comes from structure, ledgers balanced, routes secured, risks eliminated. Where pirates accept unpredictability as part of living, the company treats it as a flaw to be corrected. The sea, to them, is not a living presence. It is a system to be mastered, At the center of this vision stands Lord Cutler Beckett. He does not see himself as cruel, nor does he believe he is destroying anything of value. In his mind, he is restoring clarity to a disorderly world. Pirates are inefficiencies. Myths are distractions. Freedom without oversight is simply waste. Beckett's certainty is what makes him dangerous. He never doubts that what he is removing deserves to disappear. The order Beckett represents has no room for exceptions. Ambiguity is treated as weakness. Moral gray zones are liabilities. Every action must serve a function, and every function must justify itself through results. In such a system, compassion slows progress. Memory complicates decisions. Individuality becomes noise. Within the EITC, people are no longer singular lives. They are units, replaceable, measurable, expendable. If one falls, another fills the space without disruption. Identity dissolves into role. Purpose is assigned, not chosen. What matters is not who someone is, but whether they perform as required. This is a world that runs smoothly. Ships move on time. Orders are followed. Outcomes are predictable. And yet, something essential is lost in the silence between commands. When everything functions perfectly, nothing is allowed to feel. History is erased in favor of efficiency. Stories are reduced to data. The past becomes irrelevant unless it can be used. The EITC represents the seductive promise of absolute order, a world without chaos, without uncertainty, without inconvenient questions. But beneath this promise lies a quiet emptiness, a world that functions flawlessly, yet forgets why it exists in the first place. And at world's end, this force is not positioned as madness, but as inevitability. It is what happens when control is valued above all else, when freedom is seen not as a right, but as a threat. The company does not hate pirates. It simply cannot allow them to exist. And so the conflict is not emotional, but existential. Not a clash of personalities, but of philosophies. One side accepts the cost of choice. The other refuses to pay it. And between them, the sea waits, holding the memory of what was lost each time order decided it knew better than freedom. Davy Jones was not meant to be a villain. And at World's End, he begins as something far more restrained, a caretaker entrusted with balance. His role was clear and narrow, to guide the souls of those who died at sea from one state of existence to the next, not to judge them, not to save them, simply to ensure that the passage continued, uninterrupted and impartial. This duty demanded distance. Emotion had no place in it. Compassion could not interfere, nor grief, nor longing. The task required repetition, patience, and acceptance of solitude. In this structure, the Flying Dutchman was not a curse, but a mechanism, an instrument designed to keep the world from tearing itself apart at its most fragile threshold. The failure begins quietly, not with rebellion, but with feeling. Davy Jones allows personal attachment to seep into responsibility. Love enters a space that cannot sustain it. When that bond is broken, when the promise he trusted collapses, the balance he was meant to preserve fractures with it. The sea does not punish him for loving. It responds to the abandonment of duty that follows. From that moment, the Flying Dutchman changes. It ceases to be a vessel of passage and becomes a symbol of distortion. A system once built to serve the world now serves the wound of the one who commands it. Souls are neglected, The flow between life and death stagnates. Crew members are transformed, not as punishment, but as evidence of a task left undone. Jones's tragedy is not that he suffers, it is that he refuses to let suffering pass through him and leave. He clings to pain, reshaping his purpose around it. The power he holds, meant to be neutral, becomes personal, and when cosmic responsibility is filtered through individual hurt, it begins to rot. The Flying Dutchman mirrors this decay. Its crew is no longer transitional, but trapped. Their bodies reflect the sea, not as balance, but as corruption. What should have been temporary becomes eternal. What should have moved on is forced to linger. The ship becomes a reminder that neglecting duty does not halt the world, it warps it. Davy Jones and his vessel stand as a warning within the architecture of At World's End. They show what happens when authority forgets why it exists. When the one meant to uphold the rules begins to bend them for personal relief, the law does not collapse immediately. It deforms, slowly and visibly, until its original purpose is unrecognizable. In this world, the greatest danger is not cruelty, but imbalance, not hatred, but attachment, where neutrality is required. Jones is not condemned for feeling. He is undone because he allows feeling to replace responsibility, and in doing so, he transforms from guardian to anomaly, proof that even sacred systems fail when the one holding them forgets that the role was never meant to be about them at all. The sea in At World's End does not behave like a judge. It does not weigh intentions, nor does it measure right against wrong. It does something far more unsettling. It remembers, and memory in this world is not passive. It is structural. Every promise spoken upon the water becomes part of the ocean's record, not because the sea listens, but because it absorbs. Words, choices, betrayals, each one settles into the fabric of the world, even when no witness is present. Oaths do not need an audience to matter. They only need to be made. What defines the law of the sea is delay. Betrayal is rarely answered immediately. There is no instant punishment, no clear cause followed by visible effect. Instead, the consequence drifts. It waits. It moves beneath the surface, gathering weight until the moment arrives when it can no longer be avoided. This delay is what gives the sea its power. It allows people to believe they have escaped, that their choices vanished into water and distance, but nothing disappears. The ocean carries every unfulfilled vow forward, holding it until the world aligns in such a way that repayment becomes inevitable. When consequence finally arrives, it does not target the individual as a moral entity. The sea does not single out the guilty and declare judgment. Its response is impersonal. It reshapes circumstance. It alters conditions. It closes exits and opens storms, not as punishment, but as result. What returns is not justice. It is balance reasserting itself. In this system, freedom is not denied. Choices are allowed. Actions can be taken without immediate restraint, but they are never without cost. The sea permits autonomy while refusing erasure. Nothing is undone. Nothing is forgotten. This is what separates the law of the sea from human law. Human systems attempt to regulate behavior through surveillance and enforcement. The sea requires neither. It allows freedom to exist fully, then demands accountability over time. The longer the delay, the heavier the return. This mechanism reshapes how power functions In At World's End, control cannot fully suppress it. Authority cannot overwrite it. Even the most carefully designed systems eventually encounter the ocean's memory. No structure is immune to consequence. The law of the sea exists to remind those who cross it that freedom is not absence of responsibility. It is the willingness to accept what follows from choice. Every decision leaves a mark, not always visible, but always present, and in time, the sea ensures that these marks are felt. In this world, consequences do not rush. They wait, and when they rise, they do so not in anger, but in inevitability, carrying the quiet certainty that nothing chosen is ever truly left behind. The Flying Dutchman was never meant to be a curse. In At World's End, it exists as a mechanism, quiet, repetitive, and necessary. Its purpose is not punishment, but continuity. It was created to ensure that the passage between life and death at sea remains unbroken, so the world does not collapse under unfinished endings. The role of the Dutchman's captain is not heroic. It is deliberately narrow to guide the souls of the dead onward, without judgment and without attachment. The task demands emotional distance because emotion introduces preference, and preference disrupts balance. The sea does not require compassion from its guardian. It requires consistency. To fulfill this role, the keeper of the Dutchman must surrender a personal life, not as a cruel demand, but as a safeguard. Love, longing, and memory pull attention away from duty. They turn responsibility inward by removing the possibility of a normal existence. The system protects itself from being reshaped by individual desire. The 10-year cycle is often misunderstood as a sentence. In truth, it is a limit, a boundary designed to prevent complete severance from humanity while still preserving function. Once every decade, the captain may return briefly to touch the world they left behind. This interval does not reward loyalty, it prevents erosion. Without it, even the most disciplined guardian would eventually forget why the role exists at all. When this cycle is broken, imbalance spreads quietly, souls linger, passage slows, the sea's memory thickens with unresolved weight. The law that once moved smoothly begins to distort. What was once natural order becomes stagnation, and stagnation invites corruption. This distortion is not immediate, and it is not loud. The world does not shatter at once. Instead, it bends. Rules lose clarity. Consequences become uneven. The sea responds not with rage, but with confusion, because its systems are no longer being upheld. The Dutchman represents the cost of cosmic responsibility. It places the burden of an entire process onto a single individual. One life becomes the hinge upon which countless others pass. This is not fairness. It is necessity. The world demands stability, even if stability requires sacrifice. In At World's End, this cycle reveals a deeper truth. Balance is rarely maintained by force. It is maintained by endurance, by someone choosing again and again to place obligation above fulfillment. The tragedy lies not in the sacrifice itself, but in how easily it can be misunderstood as cruelty rather than containment. The Flying Dutchman stands as a reminder that some systems cannot function democratically. They require a guardian willing to be unseen, uncelebrated, and constrained. When that guardian falters, the world does not retaliate. It simply begins to unravel. And so the cycle exists, not to punish those who serve it, but to protect the world from the consequences of unchecked attachment. It is the quiet price paid so that others may continue living without ever needing to know what holds the boundary in place. The pirate code was never written to rule. It was written to prevent something far worse, the collapse of freedom under its own weight. And at world's end, this code exists not as law, but as restraint chosen by those who refuse to be governed by anyone else. True freedom in this world is not limitless. Left entirely unchecked, it turns inward and consumes itself. Pirates understand this instinctively. They live outside official systems, yet they know that without some shared understanding, survival becomes impossible. The code is that understanding, a fragile framework built not on authority, but on mutual recognition. The code does not command obedience. It invites agreement. It is flexible, often bent to circumstance, sometimes ignored when necessity demands it, and yet it cannot be erased, because to erase it would be to admit that freedom alone is enough. The world of pirates knows better. What makes the pirate code distinct is how it enforces itself. There are no courts, no prisons, no distant institutions handing down punishment. When the code is violated beyond tolerance, the response does not come from the state. It comes from the community. Exile replaces execution. Abandonment replaces judgment. To be cast out is to lose protection, memory, and belonging all at once. This form of consequence is subtle, but severe. Pirates are not afraid of death in the way others are. What they fear is isolation, a life without a crew, without shared risk, without witnesses. The code protects against this fate by defining the minimum conditions under which trust can still exist. Because trust, in a world built on betrayal and shifting alliances, is currency. It cannot be printed or enforced. It must be maintained. The pirate code keeps trust fragile, but possible. It allows cooperation without obedience, loyalty without submission. The code's power lies in its imperfection. It does not pretend to be moral. It does not promise fairness. It exists to keep the balance just stable enough that freedom can survive another day. When pirates argue over it, reinterpret it, or exploit its loopholes, they are not undermining it. They are participating in it. In At World's End, the pirate code stands as a quiet paradox. Those who reject law create one of their own. Those who despise control accept limits, not because they are forced to, but because they understand what happens when there are none. It is a fragile agreement among people who trust no system, but trust each other just enough, in reminder that even chaos must learn to hold itself back, because without that restraint, freedom does not fall to oppression. It collapses under its own absence of boundaries. Breathe in slowly. Let the image of the sea form in your mind, not restless, not raging, but wide and still. The surface is calm, almost gentle, as if nothing beneath it has ever been disturbed. This is the moment before the storm, when the world holds its breath and pretends that balance is effortless. As you inhale, feel that stillness stretch outward. The horizon does not rush toward you. It waits. The water does not threaten. It observes. In this quiet, the sea feels endless, patient, and old, carrying more history than it ever reveals. Hold your breath. Stay here, suspended. In this pause, allow a realization to surface. There is no side here that is completely right, no force without cost, no choice untouched by consequence. Freedom is not pure, and order is not kind. Each exists because the other refuses to disappear. What remains is not judgment, but tension, held carefully, moment by moment. Feel that tension now, not as conflict, but as balance that requires effort. Every promise made upon the water, every vow bent, every duty abandoned, every sacrifice accepted, they all coexist in this single breath. Hold it just a little longer. Notice how even stillness carries weight. Now, exhale slowly. As you breathe out, release the need to decide who should have won. Let go of the idea that the world must choose a single truth. The sea does not ask for verdicts. It only carries forward what has been set in motion. With each breath out, allow the noise of victory and defeat to fade. What remains is something quieter, fragile, unresolved. This is the shape of freedom in this world. Not triumphant, not secure, but alive. It exists because it is constantly negotiated, constantly endangered, constantly chosen again, despite the cost. Feel the sea settle once more. Not because everything is resolved, but because it continues. You are still here, the world is still turning, and the water, vast and indifferent, holds space for both loss and possibility. Rest in that thought. Let it drift without needing an answer. that World Sep's end never asks who emerged victorious. It asks something quieter and far more difficult to answer. If freedom always carries disorder in its wake, will we still choose it, knowing what it demands in return? This story does not close the sea, it leaves it open, moving gently beyond the edge of sight, continuing its slow conversation with memory and choice. Nothing here is resolved completely, and that is the point. So rest now. Let the waves remain in your thoughts a little longer. Sleep well in a world where freedom is never free, but is always worth the cost of choosing it.